Good morning. I'm Rakshit Disanayaka. I know we have some bad things going on, but we'll try our best to continue this. On behalf of Ananda College All Boys Association of West Coast, I would like to welcome all of you to our Zoom presentation and discussion on COVID-19 vaccine complication and mental health. I know we all were hoping for a fresh start in 2021 after the year we just experienced. COVID-19 in particular still weigh heavily on our communities, and we all need to stay focused and disciplined with safety protocols to keep ourselves, our families and friends safe. Widespread vaccinations are in place now, and we are having this presentation today to assist you through this important process. We are glad of commitment of our medical doctors, deeds in helping our community. My sincere thanks to our panelists today, Dr. Deepthi Jayasekara, Dr. Lasika Senaviratna, and Dr. Kapil Hage. I'm proud to say that these panelists are part of Ananda College. I'm thankful to Rahim Mantara, Colonel Lucky Rajasinghe, and Tilanjan Vitana with the planning and execution team for their tireless commitment in organizing this event. Also, I would like to thank Keshini Gunaratna and Chamo at Sri Lanka Foundation for their support and publishing in our event in their community newsletter. Now, I would like to introduce chief guest for today, Ambassador Ravinatha Aryasinghe, another talent of Ananda College. He holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy, politics, and economics, and a master in international relations. He also a Hertz Fellow in International Relations at the School of International Service, American University, Washington. Prior to his current appointment, he had served Sri Lanka as ambassador to Belgium, Luxembourg, ambassador to Holy See, and as the Sri Lanka permanent representative to United Nations for 6 years. Having joined the Sri Lanka Foreign Service in 1988, Ambassador Aryasinghe is presently the most senior officer in the service. Prior to his current appointment, he was the Foreign Secretary for Sri Lanka, serving under 3 political administrations. Now I invite Mr. Ambassador Ravinatha Aryasinghe to address the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rakshita, and all those from Ananda College and not from Ananda College who are joining in this. It is truly significant that your group has been able to do this activity, taking advantage of some of the talent within the group, but to share it with everybody, not just in the US, but I'm sure even across the world, because you're touching on a very important subject, and that is not just about COVID, but specifically the efficacy of the vaccines. Now, my trying to say anything about those subjects would not be very relevant. The only thing relevant is that I have since coming contracted COVID and come out of it. So I think it is important for all those who are concerned to understand that it is important that while we try to prevent it happening, that sometimes it does happen, and when it happens, that we should follow the medical advice. We must try to prevent it by following the advice given medically, but then if it happens, must not get too frustrated by it, but work through it and come through. Now, the vaccination offers a lifeline in a way to that hope you talked about being able to be rid of this in the new year. But from what we can see, that there is, each time you put on the television, that there is a new take about, is the vaccine sufficient? Does it take care of the new variants which are coming? And for those of us in Sri Lanka particularly, as it is to most developing countries, how fast will it get to us? Now, Sri Lanka has been fortunate in many respects in this regard. And I came here only on the 1st of December, so I saw almost a year of how Sri Lanka battled with COVID, and particularly as Foreign Secretary in the early period, I also saw some decisions which were taken, which we never had confronted or imagined having to be confronted, and we straddled those very well. And it is because of that today, the most important figure I think we must look at from a Sri Lankan perspective is that we have managed to keep deaths down to 445 as of, I understand, yesterday. Now, this, all of you know, those of you in the medical profession here who have had your primary education and medical learning in Sri Lanka, is because we had invested in a good primary healthcare system and a good medical service. So all the help you give that service while you're here through your channels and through your networks is extremely important in ensuring that people at home cutting across economic wealth and power will be able to benefit from the developments which are coming through. Since 19th February, when vaccination started, as of yesterday, over 30,000 have been vaccinated in Sri Lanka. Frontline health workers got priority. Then those who are working with COVID-related activity, such as the forces, then the prison officials, because that has become a place where there has been a lot of diagnosis. So we are going in a very, and also now parliamentarians are coming only now at this point. So we are receiving the vaccination from India, the AstraZeneca COVID Shield. We are also expecting to receive under the COVAX Global Initiative vaccines very soon. And we are hopeful that in Sri Lanka, we would be able to vaccinate a large population sufficient to generate what is now called herd immunity and going forward. Now, the one good thing about Sri Lanka, unlike sometimes what you see here, is that people are not afraid to take this vaccine. They are used to taking vaccinations, and therefore you don't have to drive them to do that. And hopefully, if we can get a good amount of vaccine soon to Sri Lanka, there is greater chance that we will come out of it. And it is very important that we come out of this, or at least bring it to a predictable and manageable level, because in the interim, the economy and the social life of the social engagement, including particularly the school system, is greatly affected, something which is common in this country as well, but particularly significant to Sri Lanka. So the endeavors you are making through this exercise to refine and make clear what the parameters of usage of the vaccine is, propagated back home, would be a very important contribution to the discourse which is currently taking place in Sri Lanka regarding the vaccinations and how to deal with living with COVID for now and also a post-COVID period. Since I have many of you online, I also want to thank you all, not, as I said at the beginning, cutting across schools, cutting across communities, cutting across what professions you belong to, for your continued support and commitment to the cause of Sri Lanka and for the activities and keeping attention to those back home. Yesterday, I had the privilege of addressing a group of folks from California who are collecting medical equipment to be sent back to Sri Lanka. And these are the kinds of things which, on the one hand, is important to you because it stays connected back home, but also it is very important to Sri Lanka because it helps bolster the capacity of the government of Sri Lanka to serve its people. We in Washington are trying to engage groups like yours across the US in a more systematic and a structured manner through the Overseas Sri Lankans Network. And I hope I will share some of that material with you so that you can also come on board and assist in a targeted manner in advocacy of Sri Lanka, socio-economic economic engagement with Sri Lanka, and also socio-cultural engagement and linkages between universities and IT and all that, because it is lifting the standards and bringing in modernity to Sri Lanka more and more, which you are very well exposed to, but some in Sri Lanka might not sufficiently be, that you can serve your country best. So once again, I thank all of you who have taken trouble to organize this, Deepthi, Lasika, and the speakers who will be following, and all those joining here. And I hope that you would be able to put out a very succinct document from this workshop, which would be of good use back home. And I think that will be helpful not only to Sri Lankans, even to other Sri Lanka communities living across the world. So thank you very much, and all strength to you as you move forward, and good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Now I would like to pass the baton to our moderator for today, Dr. Lasika Senaviratna. He is also a product of Ananda College and our immediate past president. He's the medical director of Southern California Oncology Research Consortium and chief of oncology and chief of medicine at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, California. He also a talented musician. Here is Dr. Lasika to moderate the presentation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rakshita, and a very good morning to all of you. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. A warm welcome, and also a great honor to have my good friend, colleague, and ambassador of Sri Lanka to the United States, Ravinath Arya. We go back a long way during our debating team times. It's really a great honor to be a part of this forum. As your moderator, I'll try to keep these things on time as much as possible. As you can see, we are fighting two viruses today, not just the COVID-19 virus. Looks like there's another virus that has hacked us and attacked us. So it's very appropriate that we're talking about viruses today as we battle to curb both these. It was a a little over a year ago that they reported the first death in the United States of COVID-19 infection. And since then, as of the last count, nearly 500,000 Americans have succumbed to this disease. It's 497,403 to be exact as of the last count, but I'm sure as we speak and by the end of this meeting, it would have grown because people are dying. This number of deaths that the Americans have endured during this time to COVID-19 surpasses the Americans who have died on the battlefields of World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined. More Americans have succumbed to the COVID-19 infection than in all those three wars. So this staggering statistics put into perspective the unprecedented times that we have lived through, times that we never thought that we will experience during our lifetime. But if there's any faint light at the end of the tunnel, it's the fact that actually the admissions are going down from COVID-19 into the hospitals. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a time in our hospitals, the chapel, the gift shop, most administrative offices were being turned into wards. They put hospital beds in all those places because we were just overflowing with patients. We had no place to put these patients. You go into the ICU, you saw a war zone there. People sprawled everywhere, dying a miserable death, lonely death. And we as medical providers, it was very hard for us to see this carnage going on. But thankfully now we see much less admissions to the hospitals. The death rates are falling. And the vaccines are here. The much awaited vaccines are here. And I think these vaccines are playing a huge role in reducing the admissions and the death rates. But there are lots of questions that the people have, that has arisen from these vaccines. Are these vaccines safe? Were they fast-tracked? What is the data behind this? So there's a lot of doubt in people's minds as well. The anti-vaxxers, as the ambassador said, in Sri Lanka, that's not much of an issue because we are used to vaccines. But in the United States, there are lots of people questioning these things. But there's no doubt that these vaccines are making a difference. So we thought it was very opportune right now to bring a forum with our medical experts to address these questions, these doubts, and address the questions in people's minds. What are these vaccines? There are quite a few vaccines out there. What is the Pfizer? What is the Moderna? What is the AstraZeneca vaccine? How do they differ from one another? What kind of immunity do they confer on these people? What are the side effects? What is an mRNA vaccine? Is that mRNA going to get into my DNA and make me into a monster one day? These are like some of these questions that are lingering in people's minds. That's only one aspect of it. The other aspect is the psychological impact that this has created on us. I just told you what we as medical providers have gone through in this past year, seeing these people die, lonely deaths. But what has it done to the community? People have lost loved ones. People have lost jobs and livelihood. They have, endured a lot of financial hardship. Children in their formative years of learning can't go to the schools, can't socially interact with other people. They are just stuck to a computer or an iPad at home. What is happening to children's learning capabilities through this pandemic? Childhood depression is at an all-time high. How are people coping with homeschooling, trying to do their work at home and trying to find financial means and put food on the table? A huge psychological impact is going on as well. So we thought that these two topics would be very appropriate to address. And I'm very happy to be the moderator for this session, but we have brought two experts in this field, and I'm proud to say they are both alumni of Ananda College. First is Dr. Deepthi Jayasekara. He is an infectious disease specialist, a clinical professor at the Eminent University, and he is also an expert in COVID-19. From the very inception, he's been involved in the treatments and also in the development of vaccines. I call him the local Fauci. So there's no better person, I think, to address the current situation with the vaccines and address some of the concerns that these people have in terms of the COVID-19 vaccination program. And on the other hand, to address the psychological impact, we have another alumnus of Ananda College, Dr. Kapila Marabage. He's an assistant professor in psychiatry and addiction medicine at UT Texas Southwestern. And he is also very capable of addressing some of the issues that we have raised today. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Deepthi Jayasekara to talk to us about the COVID vaccines and its implications and some complications. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Lasika, for that lovely intro. Let me begin by thanking organizing committee of Ananda College Old Boys Association for putting this together at such a short notice. As well as always, they do a glowing job and trying to do our part to educate our community in general. So having said that, what I need to do at this point is to share what I've learned by reading, by giving talks, by giving CME lectures and medical student lectures to med students and everything with you, with the community about the vaccines. And there are as Lasika pointed out, there are so many aspects of these vaccines that we don't know. The more you watch TV, the more you listen to the radio, the more you go through your social media items, the greater you get confused, unfortunately. So at this point, I think I'll try to do my best to get you up to speed. This is going at a breakneck speed, as we know. The vaccines came out at a breakneck speed, but I had to say it was breakneck speed, but it was with a laser accuracy, laser focus. So when we talk about vaccines, we cannot forget Sir Edward Jenner, who's considered the father of vaccinology and father of immunology. Right in late 1700s, he noticed that the milkmaids who attended to his cows, who actually had cowpox, variant of that smallpox, did not contract smallpox. So based on that theory, he actually inoculated a 13-year-old boy, his gardener's son, as shown on this picture. And that was the discovery, the greatest discovery in immunology. So he's also considered the father of immunology, but actually there's a little bit of controversy about that. Louis Pasteur, the French recognized Louis Pasteur as the father of immunology. We leave it at that. This is a mesmerizing schematic of the virus, but it's a very, very ruthless virus, however beautiful it looks. We're going to focus on the proteins of this virus, spike protein. Spike protein is on the surface. So that answers one of the questions that Lasika brought up. How come we fast track these vaccines? Because the virus actually presents us with the option of targeting its spike protein right on the surface. We don't have to go deep inside. Yes, we are sick and tired of quarantining and washing our hands and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, how do we return to normalcy? We have this particular pandemic, which is the mother of all pandemics, have kind of rampaged through the world and still doing that. So in order to come out of this, we need to find out what the exact strategy is, which was the light at the end of the tunnel that we were talking about, right? So in order to make this happen, we need to double down on all these steps. whether you are vaccinated or not. So I'm going to go through these steps one by one once again. The hand hygiene, social distancing, mask and self-screening with temperature. And at administration level, we need to focus more and more on contact tracing, surveillance testing with rapid tests available, rapid antigen and PCR, rapid PCRs available, and the safeguards in place of workplaces and other places such as sanitization, hand sanitizers, plexiglass barriers, and telework from home. And last but not least, vaccine. When you talk about vaccines, you have to talk about other respiratory vaccines as well, such as influenza. Every year, we provide our community with influenza vaccine, right? Learning from learning lessons from the Southern Hemisphere. Pneumococcal vaccine to prevent pneumonias. Everybody 65 and above should get two pneumonia vaccines, Prevnar 13, 1 year later, Pneumovax 23. And then other vaccines such as Bordetella, pertussis, or whooping cough vaccine every 10 years. All those things are very, very important. So I put together a formula called DREAM to treat, and another formula called DRAPE, a DREAM to prevent and DRAPE to treat. So this is the way we remember things. DREAM is distancing, respiratory etiquettes, aseptic technique, hand washing, and so on, mask. And M for, I've added more M's, mRNA vaccines and other vaccines, and monoclonal antibody cocktails. Treatment-wise, when you get COVID, it's not all doom and gloom anymore. So we do have certain protocols, certain medications hardwired into our protocols, such as DRAPE, dexamethasone, which is a steroid for people who are hypoxic, remdesivir, which is the only FDA-approved antiviral that we use, and with some success, anticoagulants or blood thinners that prevents clots, prevents strokes, heart attacks, and terminal events, and also antibody cocktails. We're going to talk about it a little later. Antibiotics are also very important because COVID-19 patients are notorious to get secondary bacterial pneumonia, especially with staphylococcus and gram-negatives, as well as pneumococcal and fungal pneumonias. And P for plasma, convalescent plasma. Little disappointing at this point because we don't have enough titers of most of the donors. And P for proning. And last but not least, E for etc., vitamin C, vitamin D3, and zinc sulfate. Moving on to the next slide. Antibody. So we need to know a little bit about antibody therapy. Now, antibodies can be provided instantaneously by monoclonal antibodies, which is given here on this slide. There are two monoclonal antibodies that we use in the Western world, mostly in the United States. Regeneron monoclonal antibody was the first one, and then second one was Eli Lilly bamlanivimab. So those two instantaneously provides antibodies, which are neutralizing antibodies, to the body to fight COVID-19. So if you, through all these measures, if you get COVID-19, we are going to call your closest infusion center or infusion service to come out to your house and give that 1 hour infusion. And we have done it so many times now. We have saved so many lives with that. What's the difference between antibody treatment and a vaccine is the fact that we are giving ready-made antibodies, whereas vaccine will generate both antibodies and T-cell immunity and instantaneous activity, right? That's the most important thing. So if you are very sick, if you are high risk for progression with moderate to severe, mild to moderate disease, that's an indication for monoclonal antibodies, whereas vaccines are meant for normal people before getting the infection. And antibodies given by monoclonal antibodies last for weeks to months. So we still recommend vaccination 3 months after the monoclonal antibody infusion. And vaccines will last for months to years and sometimes lifetime. Now, we're going to talk about the vaccines. We are going to discuss this in terms of traditional vaccine development and emergency vaccine development. As you know, the classic example of what traditional vaccine development is given here: polio vaccine, yellow fever, measles, HSV. Typically takes about 10 to 15 to 20 years, and sometimes more than 50 years, like RSV vaccine. and polio vaccine. Whereas emergency vaccines, the closest one that we could brag about all this time was Ebola. Ebola vaccine was a viral vector vaccine using a viral vector called VSV, that's vesicular stomatitis virus, and that came out within a matter of a few years. SARS and MERS did not generate vaccines because we didn't have enough time and funds to develop that. So when we talk about the development of vaccines, we have to go through this rigorous process of research and development, preclinical studies until we come to clinical. And then you get bogged down on clinical phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So phase 3 can be very, very long. But because of the human trials, human challenge trials over the years, we have fast track. That's another answer to your question, Laska. How did we fast track this? We used human challenge trials, just like what we did in emergency situations back in the day, such as smallpox, as we discussed, H1N1 and cholera and malaria, typhoid, dengue. Some of these vaccines were successful, other vaccines were not successful. Straight away, I'm going to dive into the different platforms of virus. So these are the questions that burning questions that you'll have in your mind. What kind of vaccines are available at this point? Are they RNA or mRNA virus vaccines, DNA vaccines, viral vector vaccines, and protein subunit vaccines, and inactivated virus vaccines? So we can give examples on the following slides. This is another way, another schematic of different platforms. There are classical platforms, and there are new generation or next generation platforms. So the classical ones are the whole inactivated virus. Well, the classical one is the inactivated vaccine that was produced by or manufactured by the Chinese, Sinovac. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. India also came out with the inactivated viral vaccine by Bharat Biotech company. And then there are classical platform live attenuated viruses. We know that over the years, we have had so many live attenuated viruses. We do not have any live attenuated viruses against COVID-19, except the intranasal one produced by India, and that's not out yet. So live attenuated viruses that we have experienced with are measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, and so on and so forth, polio, oral polio, all those things. And we have had those things without raising a question, without being antagonized by the anti-vaxxers, right? And we were all keeping our mouth shut when we received all those live vaccines over the years. Even today, my transplant teams, they have been tested for measles, mumps, and rubella, chickenpox titers in the serum, in the blood. If they are low, we give another vaccine to booster. And then the third one is protein subunits. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The classic example is Novavax. And then going on to the next generation one is viral vector vaccines, which are the Johnson & Johnson Oxford vaccine. And the classic one that got the world approval was Ebola vaccine using VSV. It's a harmless replicating virus that's going to send the message into the cells of the humans to produce their own antibodies. And the DNA concept is out there. We haven't accepted that as yet. The big companies in San Diego called Inovio, I think they're going to get approval very soon. And of course, we're going to talk a lot about mRNA vaccines. So this is a 6-month-old slide. At that time, vaccines were under development. And non-replicating virus vaccine, as mentioned, adenovirus type 5 was used by CanSino Biologic in China. mRNA platform was used by Moderna. DNA platform was used by Inovio. And inactivated platform was used by Sinovac. And live attenuated virus platform was used by the Serum Institute of India with their intranasal chorogenic vaccine. I think it's going to get approved and accepted, recognized by many countries very soon. Non-replicating virus, that's the main platform now. Chimpanzee adenovirus used by AstraZeneca and Oxford University. Now that got the approval worldwide, and that's the one that that's the cheapest one out there. That's the one that we really trust in developing world. Protein subunit vaccines are been developed by Novavax, Those are the subunit ones, Novavax and Glaxo. And then the other two non-replicating viral ones. So I'm very excited about the Janssen vaccine that's going to be approved within the next 2 weeks or so. And that is using another non-replicating, a very innocent, very harmless adenovirus 26. Adenovirus generally causes like a cold to human beings. Another non-replicating viral vector was used by Altimmune, that's in India. And then Louis Pasteur's Institute used a measles vector, and that is still out there. So when we talk about COVID-19 vaccines, we cannot be thankful enough, we cannot be grateful enough to two organizations, COVAX, WHO, and then Operation Warp Speed, United States. So let's talk about COVAX. COVAX is a world or global initiative, which is the vaccine pillar of the ACT Accelerator, launched by Gates Foundation, WHO, as well as Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation. We call it CEPI. 184 countries are working in collaboration with COVAX. And as we speak, Sri Lanka and most of the other developing countries got big donations from COVAX. To my recollection, it's 250,000 doses to be given, to be shipped over there within the next 2 weeks. More than 100 candidate vaccines under development. The goal was to provide 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine by the end of 2021. That's this year. More than 1.5 billion pledged for global accessibility as well as fair distribution. Whereas Operation Warp Speed under Trump administration did a wonderful job reaching out to multiple pharma companies. So obviously the entire thing got messed up because of the administrative decisions and then the political situation. But behind the screen, Operation Warp Speed actually carried on their focus to come up with multiple vaccines and give funding to them right up front. And this is a partnership between Department of Health and Human Services, CDC, NIH, and Department of Defense. And obviously, a lot of companies got the benefit of Operation Warp Speed, even doing that right now. The very first company was Johnson & Johnson, which got 450 million from us, taxpayers' money. And other partners were Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Regeneron, which is a monoclonal antibody cocktail, Sanofi, Glaxo, that will be coming very soon in the summer, and then convalescent plasma projects. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the leading COVID-19 vaccines out there now. Pfizer, we're going to talk a little bit more about Pfizer and Moderna. Both are two-dose vaccines. And AstraZeneca, Oxford, is actually doing a great service worldwide right now. Very trustworthy, very, very time-tested platform. And that's using adenovirus CH80OX1. 2 doses, once again, 4 weeks apart. Now, AstraZeneca vaccine or Oxford vaccine, they have shown data to show that if you take it over 12 weeks, that is, if you delay the second dose by 12 weeks, the data, efficacy data, are even better. Now, I haven't seen those data, but that's what I saw in one of the news items. Johnson & Johnson vaccine is going to be a game changer because it's given in one dose, and it does not need a cold chain requirement. So I think AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson is going to be the ideal for the rest of the world. Other vaccines that are reaching out to other countries as well as locally are Sputnik 5, Sputnik V, the Gamellia vaccine, which is also, according to a recent Lancet article, 92% efficacy and almost 100% efficacy against 92% efficacy against symptomatic disease, almost 100% against death and severe disease. So that's a great vaccine. Now we have data, even though we were critical about Sputnik 5 vaccine because they released the vaccine without completing their phase 3 trials. So now we know that that Russian vaccine using adenovirus 26 and 5 is a very good vaccine. Novavax vaccine already pledged millions of doses to UK and rest of the world. It's going to be approved very soon. I'm very confident. That's a brand new platform called Protein Subunit. Sinovac from China has showed disappointing results in Brazil with their clinical data showing only 55% efficacy, but still a good vaccine. It's an inactivated virus vaccine. Inovio is right here in San Diego. It's a DNA vaccine. Now, in order to inject a DNA vaccine into the cell, you have to use your smartphone device. So that is kind of tricky. I'm not sure whether I'll buy it at this point. Of course, Sanofi and Glaxo came up with some wonderful data, but their data, efficacy data, was not enough over 80 years old. So they took the vaccine back. They're going to tweak it and then release it in the summer. I think that'll be a great vaccine, Sanofi and Glaxo. And then last but not least, a French vaccine called Valneva, received recognition just recently. Now they have pledged millions of doses to UK. So when you talk about vaccines, we have to talk about mutations. Ladies and gentlemen, you're getting paranoid with the TV and radio and all kinds of news items about these mutations. But the more the scientists learn about these mutations, the more you get confident that these mutations are well covered by the current vaccines. And UK variant called B117, South African variant, which is a very, very tenacious and a very, a virulent strain. South African variant called B351. In fact, Oxford vaccine was not found to be effective. It only showed 10% efficacy. So they withdrew the Oxford vaccine from South Africa. Instead, Johnson & Johnson stepped into the arena, and now they're going to distribute Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Although the numbers are 57, 59%, overall it prevents deaths to close to 100%. So California variant and other California B1426 and other California variants have been rampant in California last 2 months. In fact, we have had the worst time in our lives of practicing medicine, practicing infectious diseases last 2 months. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later on. And then the Brazilian variant that already went to Germany and other parts of the world called P1. So let's talk a little bit about Pfizer individual vaccines. Pfizer vaccine is a mRNA vaccine, very safe, almost 100% safe. Efficacy-wise, 94.5 efficacy. And that is based on 46,000 volunteers in the phase 3 trials. And that's a great achievement, actually. And within a matter of, it was a new kid on the block to begin with, but it kind of made a beeline to the front and got the approval right away in December. And we all remember the V-Day or Vaccine Day in UK and 1 week later in the United States. So it is using the mRNA vaccine platform, and it has caused some side effects within the first 24 to 48 hours, sometimes lingering on to 7 days, like little fever, headache, and hangover effect, so to speak. But allergic reaction, severe allergic reactions are very, very, very rare. In general, with any vaccine, you get about 1 in a million adverse events, anaphylactoid reactions. But this one, because of the presence of polyethylene glycol as a preservative that kind of packaged the mRNA because it's that mRNA mRNA in vaccine is an unstable vaccine in general. So you need to package that with the polyethylene glycol in the case of both Pfizer and Moderna. So that has caused some anaphylactoid reactions, but not alarmingly so. Storage is the real threat and real challenge for us. Storage requires -70, -90 Fahrenheit and -70 Celsius. So you need deep freezers in order to transport these vaccines. FDA approved for 16 years and over. And the latest news is that after the first dose, 4 weeks after the first dose, that's 85% efficacy. But Dr. Anthony Fauci, as well as CDC, openly said that, yes, there's 85% efficacy, but we still believe in a 2-dose vaccine to get 95 or more of efficacy. And the durability matters as well with the second dose. Moderna vaccine is the LNP encapsulated mRNA vaccine, and it encodes for a S protein. Once again, it's co-developed by NIH and Moderna, and the phase 3 trials included 30,000 volunteers with 95% efficacy. 80% efficacy with 1 dose, lasting for about 3 to 6 months, they say, because at the phase 2 trial data are now about 6 months old for Moderna. Administered in 2 doses, as I said before, and PEG, polyethylene glycol, is used in an additive, can potentially cause anaphylactoid reactions. That means low blood pressure, tachycardia, high heart rate, and sometimes rashes and so on. All these are mitigated right away by our vaccine givers using certain things such as EpiPen and antihistamines right away. So FDA approved for 18 years, unlike Pfizer vaccine, which was approved for 16, this is approved for 18 years old, 80% efficacy after the first dose. So the vaccine components, as we mentioned about, the most concerning component is polyethylene glycol. Next generation vaccines are given here, Oxford vaccine, which is using adenovirus, that is chimpanzee adenovirus, OX1, and then Johnson & Johnson, this is also a next generation, and this will be approved by the FDA very soon. I'm very confident. And then the third one is Sputnik 5. Oxford vaccine they are very confident about their efficacy and safety. In fact, it's given in 2 doses, 28 days apart, and it was in partnership with both Operation Warp Speed and CEPI and WHO. Not effective against South African variant. They were very upfront about it, so they actually removed Oxford vaccine from South Africa, now being replaced by J&J vaccine, which shows 50% efficacy, mild to moderate case, and 85% efficacy for severe cases. 70% efficacious after the first dose. That's a great thing. I know there's no pushback in Sri Lanka and other countries about the vaccination, unlike here, but they have to be confident about what they are getting. They still get about 70% efficacy after the first dose of Oxford vaccine, AstraZeneca vaccine. And there's the recent study shows 67% reduction against transmission. That's a great thing. So, folks, you know that I'm sure this will be a question. When you get vaccinated, you don't think that you will still be able to transmit this virus. And it does happen because virus enters the body and try to enter the body, but it doesn't, but it lays dormant in the nasopharyngeal passage, right? So because of that, virus lays dormant there without causing hurt. So potentially you can give it to somebody. That's called transmission. So this is the very first study that shows 67, almost 70% reduction in transmission. Those are great data. And the other greatest data about Oxford vaccine is the longer you wait, up to 12 weeks, efficacy rose from 72% to 82%. That's 100% protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and death in phase 3 final analysis. Johnson & Johnson vaccines given here, which, as we talked about, is given in 1 dose. It will be FDA approved very soon. Storage at warmer temperatures, that's a huge plus, right? 71%, 72% efficacy after the second dose, but over 90% efficacy in preventing hospitalization and mortality. So as we know, as we've shown many, many times, most of these good vaccines provide almost 100% protection against hospitalizations, severe disease, and mortality. Only 59% efficacious against South African variant, but which is B1351, but it's been deployed in South Africa as the vaccine that they're going to trust, and this is also the best vaccine among young participants. And in fact, as we speak, 6 to 17 group has started their work, or they have started their work with 6 to 17 young participants. The cost analysis is given here. Pfizer vaccine is about $20 if you were to purchase. I don't think you can purchase these vaccines at this point. Moderna vaccine, almost $40. AstraZeneca vaccine is the cheapest, most inexpensive, $3, and the Gamaleya vaccine is about $10. Novavax vaccine, it's a futuristic vaccine. We use a protein platform, but we do use a chemical particle called adjuvant. This adjuvanted with matrix M. Now, matrix or nanoparticle M was used for flu vaccine put out by Novavax, and that's a normal concept. When you use a protein subunit, you need to add a chemical in order to amplify that. Otherwise, the antibody and the cytotoxic effect will be not there at adequate levels. 2 vaccines, 3 weeks apart, currently in phase 3 trials, and Novavax 89% efficacy have been shown already. Less efficacious, 49% against South African variant. Sanofi and Glaxo is coming in this July or August with a tweaked version of their old vaccine. So watch out for that. Look out for that, because that's going to be a good vaccine, or a great vaccine, I should say. Already pledged millions of doses to COVAX WHO, and also benefited from Operation Warp Speed. So After receiving these vaccines, you would think that you're going to be positive for antibodies. So if you test yourself for antibodies, you're not going to be positive, because on regular basis, we don't test specific spike protein antibodies. So you need to, or your physician will have to order specific spike binding antibodies called semi-quantitative antibodies. And they are both available. They are available both in the big labs, which is Quest as well as LabCo. But you have to specifically use that code. Antibody testing is not currently recommended to assess immunity to COVID-19 following vaccination, or the need for vaccination in an unvaccinated person for that reason. Now, when we talk about vaccines in general, we have to talk about these two syndromes called ADE, antibody-dependent enhancement, and VAERD, which I'm not going to go into details. But it's important to know that we do have our prioritization. So, right, phase 1 was already vaccinated. Now, this country had dispensed about 65 million vaccines already, and some of them already received, probably about 10 to 12% of them already received the second dose. So first tier, second tier, third tier, fourth, and fifth tier. So that's how it goes. Or you can actually divide into phase 1A, 1B, 1C, and basically focusing on healthcare workers, long-term care facility residents or nursing home residents and staff, and essential workers. So the next tier would be essential workers. My advice to you is wait for your turn, and while you're doubling down on all the mitigation things such as double masking, washing hands, and so on, pay attention to the distribution procedures. And examples of critical population, again, I think Kapila is going to talk more about the anxiety associated with vaccination and so on. But I can tell you this, there are very, very well composed reporting systems that we monitor our side effects. Those two are called VAERS, V-A-E-R-S, vaccine adverse event reporting. So if there's a difference between adverse event and a side effect. So these guys, the providers are monitoring our reporting vaccine adverse event reporting system, or VAERS, right away with certain computer online sites. They are all available to all providers. And then the second most important one is vSafe, which is given right down here. vSafe is something that we can do, can upload that and then report side effects of medication. So when you talk about side effects and adverse events, there are two types. The most common side effects, which are called teratogenicity, reported by vSafe, are pain, fatigue, and headache within the first 2 to 3 days, right? Especially within the first 2 days, and especially after the second dose. So it's very important to remember that that you're going to get some arm pain. About 70% of them got arm pain, fatigue about 1/3 of them, and then headaches about 1/3 of them. So because of that, you need to monitor your elderly patients, your elderly family members. When you get vaccinated, they can potentially get very weak. They can get big headaches and fatigue, and they can actually fall and die of the fall. So please be careful. Take care of your elderly patients and elderly family members after being vaccinated. Up to about 7 days or so, we need to monitor these things. The other, the adverse events are given on the other side. And of course, the most important adverse events are anaphylactoid reactions, serious side effects, very, very rare. It's about 11 per million with Pfizer and Moderna. But again, I think there'll be some questions about that as well. So I will let Kapila talk about these aspects, the anxiety, paranoia associated with vaccination and the disease. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Deepti. Thank you, Deepti, for your introduction. And I'll try to go through the psychological impact of COVID-19 as fast as I can. And I work for the University of Texas, and I'm a psychiatrist at the Parkland Hospital. And firstly, I want to look at this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Why I bring this up is because this is the theory that Maslow, an American psychologist, brought up in the 60s, where there is psychological health predicted on fulfilling innate human needs in priority culminating in self-actualization. So we all are, gearing towards self-actualization at the top, and we are having some esteem needs. And let me see. I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. I think is my screen shared with you or no?
No.
Not yet, right?
We don't see it, Kapila.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. It's not allowing me to share though.
Okay, so let me, yeah, I'm already off with my screen, so I think you can go ahead.
Okay, let me see one more time. Are you able to see it now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. I'm so sorry. So let me go through these again. So there is a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And why I bring it up is that in this pandemic that we are facing and we've been going through the last 1 year, a little more than a year now, is that we have all these situations that have affected us, that has affected our psychological, the physiological needs being unmet, safety needs being unmet, and love and belonging needs being unmet. So this looks a pyramid, and in that you can see that the bottom of it is the psychological needs, and then comes the safety needs, then comes the love and belonging needs. Then on top of it are the esteem needs and the self-actualization needs. All of us, especially our kids who are in high school and all that, they're looking to develop esteem and kind of reach towards self-actualization. But what has suddenly happened over the last year is that we have had trouble that has come to our lives, which has affected our physiological needs to a certain degree. If we have lost job and we have lost income or something, and then we have significant safety needs in that we cannot go and meet with our people and get along with our schoolmates, go to school. We are always worried about the safety of catching, of the risk of catching COVID-19, which has become a safety issue. And then when it comes to love and belonging needs, we haven't been able to associate with our friends, our family members, even the parents and the children sometimes. And then love and belonging needs are also affected. And the thing about this pyramid is that once the base of the pyramid is affected, the love and belonging, safety and physiological needs are affected, it becomes a little difficult to climb, like how this man is trying to do. So in that, we come to COVID-19 and the children. So let me first start with the children. What I thought was to talk a little bit about the children, talk a little bit about the adults, how it has affected all of us, and then go into this thing that I put together to see how we are going to cope with it. So children are generally used to routine, predictability, financial and emotionally stable adults. So the routine is affected right now because they are all at home and they cannot really go to school. Predictability of the situation has not been all that reassuring to them because we don't know when this will end. Some people have been thinking that in 2020, like how Lasika and Deepti pointed out, that it will all be done, but not anymore. We are looking at even 2021 as a year that we will have to go through with some precautions. And then financially and emotionally stable adults are the thing that children are looking to, but that also hasn't gotten affected due to the adults being off of work and sometimes even emotionally unstable, sometimes as a result of financial issues. And if on top of that, if there has been critical illness in the family or a death in the family, financial insecurity in the family, isolation due to all these precautions that we are taking, and emotionally stressed adults, then children will face chronic stress, which can lead to anxiety, depression, and PTSD. I put PTSD here because this is actually, if you look at it, it's a drawn out traumatic exposure to a situation over a long period. It's not the typical PTSD that you get in the war front or if somebody gets raped or something like that. It's not that, but it is like a chronic, severe, stressful event that is ongoing for a very long time. And therefore, we consider this to be some form of chronic PTSD. And then as a result of all these anxiety, depression, and PTSD, kids can have emotional withdrawal. They can go on to eat comfort foods and maybe even, put on some weight or something. And and also become cranky, maybe angry, emotionally unstable. Some more older kind of teenagers can even go into substance abuse. Now, we have noted that introverted adults and introverted kids do slightly better than extroverted kids and adults, because extroverts generally they're longing for the friendships of their friends, to mingle with others, go to school and and that sort of things. So extroverts, when they don't get that emotional kind of exposure, they might succumb to this situation a little more than others. So a little bit about the autism spectrum disorders, which also has we have it in our societies a little bit. And then what happens to kids with any autism spectrum issue is that they have a high visual memory formation. Even the image of the virus can be scary to them. This is the common image that we have of the virus. And sometimes you have to realize that autistic kids visualize things much more. I mean, they get a huge visual input from their society as well as things around them. And sometimes they cannot even put into perspective how big or small this thing is, the COVID virus. And that they might even think that the big thing is getting into their body or something. And then there might be significant emotional distress due to that. And autism spectrum disorder kids will also have fear of change. Suddenly they were taken out of their routine and they are put in a different scenario, which can affect them quite a bit. And this website that I've listed out here, Help Is In Your Hands, is a resource for parents with kids with autism. And when emotionally stressed, emotional withdrawal can happen. Like I said, comfort food, anger, substance abuse can happen. Excessive, if a kid or an adult is doing excessive avoidance due to anxiety, and there is agoraphobia or like panic attacks happening. Agoraphobia is when you confine yourself to the house, don't leave at all, you are having severe restrictions, you're feeling very scared to even step out of the house, that kind of situation. Or panic attacks, which is a condition where you have shortness of breath and palpitations and sweating, and suddenly a fear attack coming out of nowhere, and you suffer with that. If those things are happening, then the children should be seen by a professional at that point. So if I consider the adults in the COVID-19 pandemic, how it has affected us as adults is that we are always exposed to this negative information inflow. Like how Dr. Jayasekara pointed out before, there is a lot of news around it, a lot of information about the vaccines. The more the information we get, sometimes we feel confused and we feel even more scared than we began with. And feeling less productive in our lives, like happens quite a bit in college kids as well as adults, that we feel like now that we are confined to our houses, we cannot do our jobs as we used to, we are feeling less productive. And then not being able to provide for the dependents because we have been either furloughed or the salaries have been cut down, or we have outright lost our jobs. So all these things can lead to a perception of negativity, which in turn can evoke a fight or flight response in us, which can again produce a chronic stress response in adults, which leads to the same thing as the kids' anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, introverts will do slightly better than the extroverts. And the result would be in adults as well as the children, emotional withdrawal, going to comfort foods, like illicit coping mechanisms like substance abuse and anger outbursts. So in our hospital settings, we see a lot of people going back to drugs or alcohol. In the adult community, I'm not seeing a lot of kids myself because I'm an adult psychiatrist, but otherwise we see a lot of emotional dysregulations, like exacerbation of their existing psychiatric illnesses or new onset psychiatric problems, and also severe emotional withdrawals, even leading up to suicide attempts. So this is what we see. So how are we going to cope with this? So I thought I will start off with the adults. And one thing that we need to focus on is to build resilience. And one thing about resilience is prioritizing self-care, sticking to a healthy diet, exercising adequately, and appreciating nature, getting out of the house, going in for a walk, like in isolation, of course, keeping the social distancing and all that, wearing a mask if appropriate, and going out in the nature and appreciating nature, having a good sleep routine, having a schedule, and get your own space and privacy, particularly important when it comes to working from home, that people, all the kids as well as the adults should have their own space to do their work. When it comes to schoolwork, the kids should have their own space, designated space for each kid, as well as the adults who are doing their work from home, and adequate privacy. And then find happy distractions like reading and watching a movie series or a TV series or something that you get attracted to, or finding a hobby that you haven't been able to get to, like learning a musical instrument or learning a different language or something. If it's a happy distraction, it's a good thing. So this is all about self-care. And then the second thing, very important, is to find social support. This element is very, very important because we are in isolation, and if you, or like a lot of people of us, are extroverted and we want social help and be interactive with other people, we are herd animals. So we need to find an inner circle to associate with. And then how we do that is tricky, because you need to find your own social bubble with certain safety protocols. And what my thinking, and then what I have found in research, is that if people reach out to their inner circle, the people who are most important in their lives, so like if you make a list of people who are most important in your life, not acquaintances, but the most important friends that you've known for a long time or something, or your family members, etc., and make an inner circle and have a safety protocol, how to associate with them if it is done in social settings, how to keep the distance, how to keep the cleanliness and everything, but otherwise do it online like Zoom meetings. So make a social bubble, like I said, and be there for others. Like, you have to realize that being kind to the people around you, including the person that you go, when you go shopping, and the person who works in the shop would be an important thing. And then when you make a social bubble, make a schedule to connect and reconnect, that you will serve that need for social support and social engagement. And then this negative perception that I was talking about earlier, due to all the information that comes along, everything is negative, so much of death and all that. Limit the information inflow would be an important thing, because getting inundated with news items and all the data can sometimes be a negative. It can feed into your negative perception rather than treating it. So to limit the information inflow would be an important thing. And then separate self-worth from productivity. Like, you are not your product. Like, if you are not being as productive as you used to be, like last year, give yourself a break. The self-worth is not based on productivity alone. So get away from that. And then do what you can control, do CDC guidelines. And then we come to the vaccine, which is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we should be encouraged to take the vaccine. And we had enough information about the vaccine by Dr. Deepti Jayasekara just now, and we can be feeling very safe about getting the vaccine. And we as a community, Sri Lankans, like he pointed out, we are generally not afraid of vaccines. So we can go ahead and, as a community, we can go ahead and do it. And then we need to act as a model in our community. If there is anybody else who is scared of the vaccine, I think people like us, like medical professionals, elders in the community, should take themselves and be able to take the vaccine and be a model to other people and share with them what they went through and how it is, how they feel about it now, etc. And then when it comes to the kids, adapting to change, if you are doing online school, there should be structure. There should be a designated space, like I pointed out before, that they have their own space there. They know where they're going to have the school, and relaxation in between maybe sessions or at the beginning, as how it's done in schools, that you have a little PT session to relax their bodies a little bit, and then give them the appropriate lunch break at the right time. And then also have some reward systems for doing their work well. Like if they have done their homework, it is a very stressful situation for them. They're not able to get out and do other stuff. So give them some rewards for what they do. Give them some flexibility points. Like if they're flexible with different, problems that come up with, adults can make an opportunity to teach them flexibility and then reward the flexibility. In the autism spectrum kids, I have given the website already. And also they can be encouraged to express themselves through art. Sometimes that works well for them. Anxiety, depression, and what if. So kids can have a lot of what if questions because this is a very bad situation for them. Even adults don't have answers. Most of the time I have understood, and the psychologists who are working in the field tell us that reassurance alone will not work. Most of this time you have to have a chat with a kid who is having a lot of what if questions. What if I get it? What if you fall sick? What if you die? That kind of question. Encourage to look for proof. Discuss issues with them. Like, for example, if they have a fear of catching the illness and ending up in the hospital or something, talk to them about the facts to back it up, like the fear, like if whether any of their friends have gotten it, have they gotten bad, and then also always talk about the kind of precautions we take. Reassure them that we are taking precautions. You need to take precautions. This is how we going to behave for the next 6 months or so, and then model on problem solving. And then if the problem cannot be solved, teach them how to cope with it, and change the anxiety channel sometimes, and involve them in your routines. Like if they're anxious and they're kind of getting into these bad coping mechanisms, try to get them involved with you and encourage special interest in them. If they're into something special that you didn't even realize, don't push things down their throat. But if they're interested in art or learning a musical instrument, or even for that matter, learning a new video game or something which is not bad for them or something, that can be encouraged, and you can love them to do that. So that's my presentation for you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Kapila. Thank you to both the presenters. We had two excellent presentations, and I'm sure you guys learned a lot from these two talks. As you know, we've had a few technical glitches. So our question, we had to close the chat room for a while, but the chat room is open again. So if you have any burning questions, please start putting it up on the chat room. We have a few questions and answers. We have a few minutes for the question and answer sessions. And we do have some questions that we had got before this program. And I think most of them have been answered by Deepti, but just to reiterate again, one of the most common questions asked was, we have a choice of vaccines, like in the United States, we have the Moderna and we have the Pfizer. Is there any difference in efficacy? Is there any difference in side effects? What is this mRNA technology? I think you touched on most of those, Deepti, during your presentation. They're both very efficacious. They're very, very similar in their mechanism of action. This mRNA technology, I think we need to stress, has been around for at least 3 decades. So this is not a new technology. The science has been there. And so it was just a case of logistics. The freezers that are needed for transportation, there was no need for it until now, where you're in a pandemic situation. So the science is very solid behind this. And we, as soon as they were able to sequence the genetic code for the virus, it was only a matter of time before they got that mRNA piece for the spike proteins, put it in a fat bubble, and then the vaccine was ready to go. And I think it should be reiterated that no shortcuts were implemented, and they did clinical trials over lots of, like, thousands of patients, and I think nobody has suffered any untold side effects. And I think the second point is, if you're going to have side effects to these vaccines, they're pretty much immediate, like what Deepti mentioned about anaphylaxis, but also they're not going to come years and years later. So I think it's very reassuring that thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people have been vaccinated, and they've been very safe, efficacious. And I think and we have all got it. I think all the speakers on this panel, my family members, my mom, who's over 65 years, has gotten it. My daughter, who has a nut allergy, and was actually asked to take an EpiPen with her at one point. She's in the medical field, so she got it. So it's very reassuring if our family members have got it and we have got it ourselves, then I think that's a strong message we can send individually. But of course, you have to always consult your private physicians. but these vaccines are very safe. A few questions that came up, Deepti. There is a question here on the chat saying that because of the inclement weather, the bad weather, that some of the shipments have got delayed, and my second Moderna shot may be delayed past 42 days. Should I be concerned? Any comments on that?
Yeah, so my answer to that would be no, you should not be concerned, because a classic example is the Oxford vaccine, right? Oxford vaccine, the data so far has shown even better efficacy when you wait for 8 to 12 weeks, that's 3 months. So now I haven't read that data, but actually it's there on the CDC website. So I firmly believe that whether you take it at 4 weeks versus 8 weeks, there isn't much of a difference. But CDC clearly says to Americans to take the vaccine at least at 6-week mark, right? So whether it goes a little bit over or not is really doesn't matter. So I'm very confident that that's not going to make a difference. And of course, there's an Arctic blast going on right now, right? Pretty much like the whole of Midwest of this country. So there is going to be delays. There were some bottlenecks to begin with, but that's with regard to distribution. But these are the things that we can avoid, like the deep freezes in certain areas, Arctic blast, and so on. But I think it's going to be all right. We've already done our share. It is at a turtle speed at this point because of politics involved and stuff. We should have started earlier. We should have ramped up right away. We should have bought more vaccines, more doses from those companies which were FDA approved. But that's past. We had to move on. I think the Biden administration, the main goal is to vaccinate everybody by end of July. So 600 million vaccines by end of July.
Excellent. Thank you. And then there's another question. What's the reason for the vaccines to be approved mostly for adults? But I think it's because the trials were only conducted in adults. They're just starting the children, the trials on children. So I think that data is still lacking. And thankfully, the children are not as affected as some of the adults and those with comorbidities. But I think that answer is already on the thread that mostly the trials were done for the adult age groups.
Right. Lasika, I get asked this question over and over and over again. I'm pretty sure somebody out there will have that question in their minds, not typing in the chat. Pregnant. What about pregnant women? What about lactating women? So those are valid questions. So IDSA I was part of IDSA webinar 2 days ago. They just put out their recommendations. Yes, there's no data, but at the same time, there's no data to show that it's going to have ill effects on pregnancy or fetus. In fact, some of the study participants, actually, they just put out the number as 23. 23 got pregnant during vaccination, during the phase 3 trials. And none of them had any teratogenic effects. And that's number one. Number two, especially among adults, can we vaccinate with multiple vaccines at the same time? So the answer to that is no. We don't allow multiple vaccines at the same time to be co-administered with COVID-19. We generally ask, or CDC and IDSA both have asked, at least to wait for 2-week period unless there's an emergency, like a tetanus toxoid, right? You get an injury, you need a tetanus toxoid. At that point, you need to get that tetanus shot. But all the other vaccines, such as pneumonia vaccine, the shingles vaccine, and so on and so forth, should be postponed by 2 weeks.
Right. So thank you for that. There are some other questions that came on my personal cell phone. These are some of the people that didn't want to type. For Kapila, there's a question that if a kid is having a temper tantrum, and I think that's very commonly seen these days because of their being, frustrated at home. How best to handle that? Is it to put them in a timeout situation if they were doing it at school, or how best to handle that?
Well, thank you, Lasika, for that question, and whoever asked that question. The typical way of handling a temper tantrum is to put them on a timeout. which sounds ridiculous at this point because yeah, they're already in a timeout, in a way. But I guess to nip, to manage the acute situation, the timeout still warrants. And then you need to have an understanding about like a sequence of events, what led up to the temper tantrum. Sometimes it can be a frustration related to being cooped up all the time. You need to find out, like, as a parent, have a discussion when they are cooled off, what led up to that, what is the opposition that is going on. Most of the time, like I suggested earlier in my slides, doing some exercises on a daily routine, like, going out in the nature might help with these things. And sometimes if you need to lax some of the restrictions that were there before the isolation came about. Like, for example, if they're really fighting to play a video game or something, you need to give it a little more space compared to how it was before or something. So you need to serve their needs also. Most of the time, temper tantrums come along in adults or in children when they feel they are not heard well enough. So to take some time to hear them out and ask exactly what they are going through and get to the root cause of the problem, and to solve the problem to the best of your ability as a family would be the best way to go in the long run. But in the short run, still, time out would be good. Sometimes taking them out for a walk would be good, but I don't think that would be feasible if the temper tantrum is really severe at the time. So it has to be started with a timeout, then sequentially work through to get to the root cause of the problem and try to solve it.
Thank you, Kapila. Again, to Deepti, this is a very common question that's coming. I think I told you my personal family's experience, but again, asking if you have a food allergy, should we be taking the vaccine or not?
Yes, definitely. So if you have a food allergy or any kind of medication allergy, if you have had a severe allergic reaction such as anaphylaxis is basically a reaction that drops your blood pressure, that raises your heart rate and puts you in a hospital, and sometimes requiring EpiPen, right? In that situation, I would still be very, very concerned. Other than those situations, everybody else are okay to get the vaccine, but it's always good to have some kind of antihistamines with you. Sometimes I tell them to take a couple of doses, like maybe 2 doses or 3 doses leading into the vaccine of Benadryl. That is Benadryl, which is a histamine 1 blocker, and then H2 blocker like Pepcid, right? The combination of Benadryl and Pepcid, maybe 2 to 3 doses prior or leading to the vaccine. That will definitely help, at least to, alleviate the anxiety. Now, all the sites that are giving out the vaccines are supposed to have their EpiPens ready for a reaction right away. Now, again, we are talking about adverse reactions within the first 30 minutes, right? And we monitor these patients for 30 minutes after the vaccination. So based on those 2 alone, yes, any kind of vaccine, except I still have to say polyethylene glycol. If you have had a severe anaphylactic reaction to any kind of polyethylene glycol, such as the soap, the rubs, and so on and so forth, then you will have to avoid vaccination with the mRNA vaccines.
Yes, that's very important. I think that point is very important for those who have gone through the vaccination process. They don't release you immediately. They will observe you for about 15 to 30 minutes. They are fully equipped with EpiPens in case you develop an allergic or anaphylactic reaction. So that's reassuring. Another question that came on my cell phone is whenever I get the normal flu shot, I get the flu very badly. So will this matter with the COVID vaccine? That's another thing people have in mind, is whether the vaccine will give you COVID or, since I'm working with kids, we are about to get the vaccine next. As teachers, what is your advice?
That's right, yeah. So Lasika and Kapila, we used to laugh at that kind of questions before, didn't we? Now we've realized that these are real questions. These are the real burning questions that people have. I myself might have that burning question. But time and time again, we've learned that COVID-19, among the COVID-19 vaccine, we don't have a single live vaccine. We don't have a single live attenuated vaccine, right? Again, the common live attenuated vaccines are measles, mumps, rubella, we call it MMR, varicella, polio, and then Zostavax for shingles, the earliest Zostavax. So we've received all those things, nothing happened to us, but we don't give them to people who undergo the transplant, such as stem cell transplant and solid organ transplant, AIDS with HIV, and other immunocompromised patients. So short answer to that is no, there's no such concern at this point of getting actual virus, because there's no virus in the vaccine.
Good. Yes. Okay. I see a lot of questions coming in now. The next one is, I received the Moderna first shot already and getting the second shot in 2 weeks. I have the ability to get the Pfizer. Is it harmful and or redundant to get both vaccines? In other words, can you mix and match? Or if you got the first one as Moderna, do you have to get the second one also the same, or can you mix?
Yeah, that's another great question, actually. So both WHO and CDC have put it out there, saying that the vaccines are not interchangeable. Vaccines are not interchangeable. We do not recommend that. But in desperate situations, I guess we will have to do that. But there's no such desperate situation in the United States at this point. I think if you have had Moderna, you go with a second Moderna after 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Whereas if you have had Pfizer at 3 weeks or 6 weeks, you can get the second. I think that's my advice to you. There are studies going on by Oxford University in London. They're trying to interchange and mix and match, and those data will be out very soon. The future, there might be recommendations about that kind of situations as well.
Okay. Another question: is it safer for a person to who got a vaccine with a lower efficacy to get a better vaccine that has more than 90% down the road?
Yeah. So again, it kind of rhymes with the previous question, right? So if you have had a vaccine of lower efficacy, you're not supposed to get a different vaccine later on. I mean, generally, there are two things that could happen. You can actually exhaust the vaccine pool and kind of, prevent another person getting the vaccine. That's number one. Number two, all the vaccines, whatever the numbers out there, with the 72% for Johnson & Johnson, Oxford for 72%, Pfizer for 94%, Moderna for 94.5%, whatever the numbers are for symptomatic disease, when it comes to severe disease and deaths and hospitalizations, I think there's almost 100% efficacy of all the vaccines. That's the part a lot of people don't have a hard time understanding, right? Because there are two types of data out there. The data for regular symptomatic disease, that's mild to moderate disease, and then data for severe disease that require hospitalization, ICU care, and death.
And also, I think we got a little spoiled by the Moderna and the Pfizer giving 90+% efficacy, whereas most of the other vaccines, if you get about 50, 60%, I think that's pretty good efficacy also, like the flu shot. So yes. Yeah. I think we shouldn't just say the other vaccines are not as effective, because they do prevent the infection and the death rates. That's very important. Right. Another one that's, oh my God, my cell phone is known to a lot of people, I guess. Kapila, there's a question. Are there any resources out there for people to reach out to for like therapy sessions for children and so on? This is all about children's psychological behavior, I think. Are there any resources that they can tap into?
Yes, I think I hope we can share my slides later on or something. There is an app, I think ICBT, I small I and capital C for cat, B for boy, and T for Tom. ICBT tutor or something, and that helps adults and kids. You can download it for free. It's from the VA, the Veterans Administration. For the VA veterans, it has been designed for PTSD in particular, but it is useful specifically for adults, because I think it's more geared towards adults since it came out of the VA. But children, I don't know of any resources per se, but the one that I pointed out for the autistic children is of course there, which is a great resource. But ICBT is one of the resources that can be helpful for general anxiety and depression.
Excellent. And this is the very reason why we brought this program to you guys, is because there are resources available And please reach out to any of these consultants, specialists. I'm sure, Kapila, you'll be willing to share some of these if people reach out to you. Same
Of
with
course, yeah. You can privately reach out to me anytime you want, and then I can kind of give you some direction if there is some problem.
And same with Deepti, same with me. We'll share our information. So you can always reach out to us if you have any specific concerns or questions. And I think well, there was one last question that came to us before the program, and that was that Sri Lanka was going to have a huge vaccination program, and that they were going to get like 18 million vaccines, and they were going to vaccinate everybody in 3 months. Does that mean the Indian vaccine is produced at a much faster rate than what Pfizer and Moderna are doing?
Yeah, that's quite true, Lasika. I think Serum Institute of India is the biggest vaccine producer in the world. It has been, right? It puts out so many vaccines on daily basis. So they have the capability to run massive doses, manufacture massive doses at the same time. So they are distributing their vaccines not only to Asian countries, but also to South American and African countries. So they are actually doing an excellent job. Data coming from certain vaccine manufacturers, such as Australian manufacturer of Oxford vaccine, AstraZeneca vaccine, are even better than the original Oxford vaccine. So I don't know how that happened, because Australia, they produce their own Oxford vaccine, but the data are 90%, close to 90%. So very similar to Moderna and Pfizer when you talk about Australian data. So it's very important to know all these vaccines are great. Now, there was another question before you move on, Lasika. There's one other question. What if you got COVID-19 already, but you already contracted COVID-19? Are you going to wait, or are you going to get vaccinated? So to all my patients, we say, you don't have to wait. Typically, we wait for about a month or so. Typically, we wait for about 2 weeks after the last symptom. So that's about a month or so. But you don't have to wait for more than 1 month. I would recommend take the vaccine, the first vaccine that comes your way, a month after COVID-19 infection. If you had a severe viral infection with COVID-19 requiring hospital admission and stuff, those antibodies can potentially last. Cytotoxic T cells as well as B cell antibody activity can last for up to 3 months, but definitely not beyond 3 months.
Got it. So there are lots of good stuff coming on both the chats as well as private lines. There's somebody who's reaching out and saying that they have established a private school for autistic kids 6 years ago. So if you have any children with autism who are having a hard time with the lockdown, that they will be willing to happy to share the information and best practices for autism to support, or maybe even give a presentation someday if that helps. So those are very important and relevant issues that we can share with you. So if you have any children with autism or who have a hard time with that, please reach out to us. And I think one of the members on the line is willing to do that because they have that resource. There is one more question that came to me. Recommendations from CDC says that people who have received both vaccines do not need to quarantine even after exposure. What do you say?
Yes, that's true. That's quite true. In fact, this is part of our National Science Foundation project with Sri Lanka. We actually turned in some recommendation with regard to quarantine for people who travel from outside, whether they're vaccinated or not. So based on the latest CDC recommendation where they say, and that's quite true, and we completely agree with this, that if you're fully vaccinated, you get exposed to a sick patient, confirmed COVID patient, you don't have to quarantine for 10 days like what we did before, right? 7 to 10 days. 7 days, we used to do 7 days, and we still do unvaccinated people. if you got exposed to a COVID patient, you're supposed to self-quarantine for 7 days if you have access to a negative PCR test. If you don't have access to PCR test, 10 days. Now that quarantine has been discouraged or taken out by with this latest recommendation of CDC. So this is another reason why we all should get vaccinated within the next few months, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be something that we call a vaccine passport. They're already talking about it. You will not be able to travel anywhere internationally without the vaccine hereafter, right? You may not be able to enter a sports arena or like big gatherings that to your liking because you're not vaccinated. So that kind of situation, don't run into that kind of situations. So we have a set of very safe vaccines, and when it's your turn, please go and have that vaccine.
So somebody's asking, is it okay to get both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine? At this point, I don't think there's any data to suggest that getting both is going to be more effective than getting either one of them. So at a time when we want to make sure everybody gets vaccinated, I think if you get one of them, that's pretty good, I think. Deepti?
Yes, I completely agree. Yes.
All right. So I think pretty much those are some of the questions. In the interest of time, I think we will call it a day very soon. I would like to invite now Secretary Mr. Rahim Mantara to give the vote of thanks. Once again, thank you, Dr. Deepti Jayasekara and Dr. Kapila Marambage, both very distinguished alumni of Ananda College, and also everyone else behind the scenes, Ananda College Old Boys Association of the West Coast, for arranging this wonderful meeting. It has been my honor and pleasure to moderate this, and hope you guys will all be safe and get vaccinated soon. And over to Rahim.
Great discussion, Lasika, and the doctors. Good job.
Oh, Ravi,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you were still on the call.
I was listening to it with my 16-and-a-half-year-old daughter.
Oh my gosh, that's
very good.
That's
Very good.
awesome, and thank you very much for joining.
Great service to everybody and the community. And if you have it recorded, I think you should put it somewhere so that it was simplified. And I think particularly Kapila's presentation, which probably is not something which gets discussed so easily. You hear CNN talk about the first one ad nauseum, and we know everything about the vaccines and everything, but very little really discussion is there about the ramifications of it. So great job. Make it known, make it more broadly disseminated. Important that you do that.
Sure.
Will do, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule.
Proud of all of you.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rahim.
Go ahead, Rahim.
Ladies and gentlemen, this event was organized for you, and they appreciate all you participating and encouraging us to hold events of this nature in the future. We appreciate the presence of the Sri Lanka ambassador, the US, Mr. Ravinatha Aresinghe, and his encouraging words to us who are far away from our country. Thank you, sir. We sincerely appreciate the efforts made by our medical professionals, Dr. Deepti Jayasekara, Dr. Kapila Marambage, and Dr. Lasika Seneviratne. They shared their medical knowledge and expertise to educate us on the worst pandemic of our time, and this attempt we should take to be safe. We, the old Anandians, thank our young Anandians, Manjula Vitana, Dilash De Silva, and Chatura Keva Vitharana, for helping us to organize and publicize this event. Thank you, Mr. President, Rakshita Disanayaka, for all your efforts to put things together and keep things in track from the inception to the end. We thank the Sri Lanka Foundation for helping us to organize this event too. Our appreciation would not be complete if I don't mention Colonel Lucky Rajasinghe, from who I consider the backbone of the organization. He was instrumental in putting all these things together in the military precision. Colonel Lucky, we are lucky to have you. Last but not least, we thank God for helping us to organize these events and keep us our spirit hope in time of need. May God bless us all. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.